Hi everyone, my name is Taryn Cleaves and I am a children's pastor in Iowa, in the Quad Cities area of eastern Iowa. And I am so excited to partner with you all in this season of learning for you, in this certificate program. And I'm very honored to get to share with you about this topic that is a passion of mine regarding power in the clergy sense, and how we can recognize power, how we use our power as pastors, and how we can prevent abuse of power. Real quick about me before we dive in, I just want you to know that I am a doctoral student at Sioux Falls Seminary, and my main project will be on abuse of power and helping women recover from abuse of power or another adverse thing that has caused trauma in their lives, utilizing both biblical learning, a reimagination of narratives from the Bible, as I am currently in the throes of research for, in addition to Taekwondo. So I am very close to being a first degree black belt in Taekwondo, which has been a part of my own story of healing, and so I'm so excited to merge kind of these two worlds that I love and help other women on their recovery and healing journey as well. So I don't want to take up too much more time, as I know our time is short today, or whenever you may be watching this, and so I want to kind of get into the thick of it. So the first thing I would start is about abuse of power. And many times, so I've been on this track for several years, and most of the time when I talk with pastors about power and clergy sexual misconduct or other forms of abuse of power, most pastors that I talk to have no concept of their sense of power in their position. They hear power and they immediately think of like brute strength. They think, like I'm not out there hitting anybody. I'm not yelling at anybody a whole lot, and so I don't have any power. And a lot of pastors get told no so often that they struggle to think that they have any power, because they think that having power means I'm a bulldozer in the room and I get my way no matter what it is I want, or nobody can stop me because I'm a bulldozer and I use my power directly in meetings or to get what I want. And most of the pastors are not that way, but they still have power, and that's where the differentiation, the understanding of what is power in a clergy sense. What does that mean? Because most of the time, like I said, pastors are not used to getting their way, so they often get told no by their boards, by the eldership, by the deacons, whatever their church government is. So they're so used to being told no that they think they have no power at all. They believe that, they ask for a new carpet and they get told no. They ask to have a new service or a new music or a new drum set or whatever it may be, and they are told no. So they don't believe that they have power. But that is a misconception of what power actually is in the church. And power in the church is when there is a sense of spiritual authoritativeness over somebody else. And it doesn't matter about how you feel about it as a pastor, or even how you're talking about it. It's not that you're going around yelling at everyone Bible verses like, hey, thou shalt not, and that means I have power. It's just the fact of your position. So being a pastor means that you have power, because people are coming to you for you to represent God and what He wants for their life. That searching out, that very position, just the position of taking on a pastorhood calling, means that you have power in people's lives. And with power comes great responsibility, right? And so I explained it like this. A congregant of mine that I was mentoring a season ago, a couple of years ago, she and I were talking, and I was kind of on the beginning of my learning journey with regards to power and the church, and so we were just kind of chatting back and forth. And she's a person that you can be kind of strong with, and kind of argue. She likes to argue. So she was talking to me, and she was like, "No, pastors don't have power. They don't have power because I am a powerful person and I can choose what I want. Like no one tells me what to do, kind of thing." And so I looked at her and I said, because we also have a relationship outside of church, which is difficult at times, but she would consider me a friend. And so I looked at her and I said, okay, Allie, let's talk about this. Let's say that you and I and a whole group of people, of all of us gals, are out and we're bowling. And you order a pitcher of beer for everyone, and she knows that I choose not to drink. And so she said, I said, you order a pitcher of beer for everybody, and I'm over here, I have my Dr. Pepper. And, maybe everybody's on their second or third glass of beer. And all of a sudden I speak up. Now we're in a totally friends setting, but I speak up and I say, you guys really shouldn't be drinking anymore. What would you do? And she thought about it and she said, oh my goodness, I would put down the beer and wouldn't have any more. And I said, exactly. And even though we are friends, my weight, my position at church, because I'm a pastor, cannot be separated from my friendship with you. And so that means that I bring my power with me into every dynamic of our relationship, because what I say, if I make a moral judgment, it affects you as a person. And that means that I have power. And as I told her that example, she began to understand. And she's like, oh man, yeah, I never thought of it that way. So those are the examples when I talk about pastors having power. It's that kind of thing. Now, why do we have power? It's because we represent God to other people. So the things that we say, even when we say it not thinking, that happens to us from time to time. We say things off the cuff. We say something how we really feel, and it's not polished or having thought through, or it might be on the heat of a moment. And people look at us and they judge us and they say, hey, you're a pastor, you shouldn't be saying that. It's because people look at us and have a certain expectation for how we will respond in any given moment. And our humanity is kind of lessened in their eyes because we are always representing God to them. What does it mean when pastors intentionally misuse their power? Well, that goes into abuse. And so with abuse is the intentional misuse of power, whether that's for personal gain, whether that is because a person has gone astray in their own heart and they have chosen to want something other than what God would want for them or the other person, any of those things. So in my mind, where it immediately goes to is the idea of a pastor having an inappropriate sexual relationship with a congregant. And oftentimes what has happened, and I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but how many of you, think about this, have heard of a pastor, what is called in the news or when the church announces it, is that a pastor has had an affair with a congregant, and either that congregant is dismissed from the congregation, maybe the pastor is dismissed from his position at the congregation. A lot of times the pastor gets to stay on, and they get the pastor help and get their family into counseling. Now, you might have heard that as, this pastor's had an affair with a congregant. However, our definition of power means that a clergy person can never have an affair with a congregant. And what I mean by that is the use of the word affair. An affair is when a sexual relationship or an emotional relationship happens between two equals. And that goes into the idea of consent. What does it mean to consent? We think of consent as just a verbal yes. That's how we define it most of the time, especially in casual conversation. So we think of adult of consenting age in the legal sense. Absolutely, she must have been consenting because it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so it does not work like that in the pastoral relationship, and not just actually in the pastoral relationship. This is true of anybody who has power over anybody else. So an example of this would be like the police, a therapist, a licensed therapist, a teacher, and clergy, and doctors are included in there as well as common examples. So think of all those realms. When it is reported that a person in power has had an inappropriate sexual relationship with someone in their realm, it is interesting to me that it is only when it's clergy that it's considered an affair. And so in the other realms, when we talk about therapists, they are immediately stripped of their licenses. They are no longer able to practice, and that goes nationally, and it's in the news, and that it's an inappropriate abuse of power. Same with police. So if a prison guard has a sexual relationship with a prisoner, that is considered an inappropriate use of power, and that prison guard is removed from their relationship, and it is not considered consent just because it was an adult. Doctors become a little bit iffy because of our world right now, but if a doctor is using his office and the place where he sees patients to have a sexual relationship, that is abuse of power. And same with teachers, and a lot of people like to argue about that one, like, oh, there's a college professor, yada yada yada. But if a person has power over you, then reality says that person, the person who is their victim, cannot consent because of the differences in power. And that is where power comes into play, because if a person has power over me, then we are not equals. If this person can say something that makes me change my behavior, or makes me think differently about God, or any of those things, has control over me, that I care about what they think in terms of I want to live my life in a way that is meaningful to them, or I want to make them proud of me, or anything like that in an authoritative sense, then there is no way to have an affair with that person, because it is not equal. Equals are on the same plane. Both people can say yes, both people can say no, and that no is respected. So when this person says no to this person, that no is respected, and they never ask them again, they don't chide them, they respect their no from the get-go. Most of the time, well, no, not most of the time, all of the time, when there is abuse, it's because a boundary has been crossed. So even when this person has said no, this person does not take the no for an answer in the long term. So it might break down those barriers over time. I have a cat coming to see you all. Okay, so that is where clergy sexual misconduct needs to be labeled accurately. And as pastors and therapists and lay people even, we have to understand and recognize what is abuse of power, because we are in positions that people may come and disclose to us. And so we have to be prepared that when a disclosure happens, we understand what it is. We can recognize what it is because we've done the work to understand abuse of power in our realms, in our context. What does your context look like? You may be at a non-profit. What does that look like? Non-profits, churches are often non-profits, but they're not always the same. They're not necessarily run the same way, and I understand that. But what might abuse of power look like in that situation? What if a coworker comes to you and says that the head of the organization propositioned them for a sexual favor? What would you do? You have to think through this, because as Christians, as Jesus followers, we are expected to call a spade, to label something as truthful or as evil and a lie. Jesus did this. Throughout his life, he labeled what everyone else had mislabeled. He set right what had been made wrong by the people of power in his day. We need to rethink how we explain biblical truths and stories that we've often been taught. Most of us have been taught incorrectly or through a different lens, certain Bible stories, and so we've grown up never questioning what we know because we know what we know. But if we're never question it, if we never reimagine or rethink or look through a different lens and interpret the stories through different characters' eyes, thinking through how they feel, thinking through what it might have been like for them, understanding the culture of that day, then we will fall guilty and mislabel someone's disclosure to us. One of the most important things we can do as Jesus followers is understand and label accurately abuse and be able to call a spade a spade. I have found in my job, and again, I've been kind of on this journey of abusive power and wanting to rectify and bring justice to situations for about 2.5 years. And I have found in my church, in my congregation, that my calling in this area has caused, it's not something I talk about regularly from the stage. Some people know that I'm doing this work, but some people don't. I'm in a very large church. But interestingly enough, I have had more women come to me and talk to me about their marriages and my ability to say to them, what is happening to you in your home is abuse. And it's not okay. And being the first person in 20 years, 15 years, that has told them deliberately with love and labeled accurately with love and understanding, grace, and patience that what their husband is doing to them is abuse. And even counseling some of them that it's time to get out of their marriage. It's the first time that they've ever heard that. And I believe that God hates divorce. I know that that is in His holy word. But what I also believe is that God will not put up with abuse of power from people who are in positions of power over others, whether it be women, children, or anybody else. So, I believe that it is important for us to recognize what is power, how do we abuse it, all of those things, and understand the dynamics. There are so many more dynamics than can go into a 20-minute video. So I want to give you some resources of what you can do to learn about this on your own. Please feel free to contact me as well. I am more than happy to reach out, to have conversations, to meet you on Zoom, anything like that. Any way that I can help you as you move on in your journey of education and awareness. Anyway, I want to tell you that the most important thing you can know is that abuse of power happens in every organization. It will happen. And you might be a part of an organization where it happens. And you could be the person that calls a spade and tells the truth and rights wrongs, holds people accountable, and brings justice to victims. We serve a God of justice, and so He is for the victim in these situations. He does not condone abuse of power. And so how can we learn more? Well, there are tons and tons of resources, and I have a Word document with all of these things on there. Again, my specialty is more on the clergy sexual misconduct side, but abuse of power is a whole range, it's a whole continuum of what that is. So we've seen in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of pastors right now falling from their positions, high powered people that we never thought we'd be talking about. And just an example that's still in the news today, John MacArthur, abusing his power. If you look at those, if you know anything about not John MacArthur, I'm sorry, James MacDonald, excuse me, not John MacArthur, James MacDonald. If you look in the news with James MacDonald, you will see a pattern of abuse of power, and from what we know at this point, nothing sexual, but there is obviously an abuse of power in his ministry, and it was a long-standing one that's coming unraveled. Willow Creek with Bill Hybels, never ever thought 15 years ago that we'd be sharing his name in such a situation, but here it is. And I believe that the Bible is true, that whatever is hidden will eventually be revealed. God promises that in His Word, and sometimes it's not immediate, and it might take decades long for that to happen, but it is the truth. God will reveal it. Mark Driscoll is another name that is synonymous now with abuse of power. all of those things. He happened a little while ago, but just some of those names, in addition to the clergy in the Southern Baptist Convention that are being called out for sexual abuse, all of those things. So I pray that you will do more research. I pray that if this has sparked something in you, that you can get a hold of some good resources so you can start learning. So I want to share just a few with you. I'm going to hold them up and talk about a little bit about them so you can learn more. So this is a very old book. Very old being relative. I hate to say that. This is from the 80s, 1986. So it's 1 year younger than me. But it's a kind of a timeless book, and it crosses the span. So it's called Sex in the Forbidden Zone. When men in power, therapists, doctors, clergy, teachers, and others betray women's trust. So this one's is great because if you feel like you're not in a church setting, but you might be in a different setting, this one talks to those settings. So Sex in the Forbidden Zone. This one is probably the foundational text that I have read and helped me understand clergy sexual misconduct. So it's called Betrayal of Trust by Stanley Grins and Roy Bell. So it's called Confronting and Preventing Clergy Sexual Misconduct. And this one is great for clergy. It really helps you understand the dynamics of clergy sexual misconduct, but also abuse of power. And it's also for people who want to prevent. So if you're a leader in a church and you're thinking like, man, we need some good prevention here, that's a great book. This one is called Before the Fall by Niels Freeberg. I know Niels personally, and this was a great book. So this is Preventing Pastoral Sexual Abuse, and just a great man, a great book. This one is called Unfair Advantage. So again, this one runs the gamut because it talks about therapists, police, and priests. It is by Terry Austin. Unfair Advantage, again, it goes across the spectrum of different powerful relationships. This one's called When a Congregation is Betrayed, so it's responding to clergy misconduct, and it's really based more in sexual misconduct, but it can be any kind of misconduct. So this is a step-by-step guide. It goes through all the people to think about. So there's layers and a domino effect of who has been affected when a pastor abuses their power and how we should respond. So it's a great handbook if you're in a situation or become in a situation where you're stuck in the organization in the aftermath of someone abusing their power. Great resource. This one is abuse. There's lots of types of abuse. Again, there's emotional abuse, there's verbal abuse, there is spiritual abuse, there's physical abuse, and sexual abuse. So this one is a great text, The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse. This is Recognizing and Escaping Spiritual Manipulation and False Spiritual Authority Within the Church by David Johnson and Jeff Van Wanderen. So this is a great text, a foundational text on spiritual abuse. So if you want to read about spiritual abuse, this is your text to start with for sure. This one is called Soft Shepherd or Almighty Pastor, and it's about power within the pastoral care relationship. So when people are coming to us for counseling, all those things, we have a lot of power in that moment. And so how do we manage our power? It's a great read. So in the clergy sexual misconduct field, there's a name you will come across over and over again. Her name is Marie Fortune. She passed away a couple of years ago, but her resources remain on. This is a really small text, but it's called Sexual Abuse by Clergy, A Crisis for the Church, and just a fabulous book. I highlighted a lot in that little tiny text. So great one. This one's called When Pastors Pray, Overcoming Clergy Sexual Abuse of Women, and this was a collection of essays by different authors from all over the world. So you get a very global perspective because this is not something that is just in the American church. It's happening all over. So if you are a missions-based organization or anything like that, it's a great resource to have. Escaping the maze of spiritual abuse by creating healthy church cultures. This one's a great one. Again, if you're a leader in an organization and you kind of want to go the prevention route by going, okay, here's how we need to set it up, here's how we need to be aware, here's how we need to train our people, etc., etc. This is a great resource. The verbally abusive relationship, I've handed this out to so many people in my congregation because we hear verbal abuse and we think it's a lot of yelling, and it's actually very little yelling, and it's more manipulation and emotional manipulation. So how to recognize it, all of this is a great resource to have to understand verbal abuse. Sex in the Therapy Hour. This is, again, an older resource from, I believe, the 80s. But, again, it talks, it's about not just, it's about professional incest, what they call professional incest. So about anybody in an abusive power, in a power relationship, abusing that. This one is called The Abuse of Power, a Theological Problem. So this goes into the theology side of abusing power and how we can understand that. How do we understand abuse of power from that perspective? And then this one is one of the things I talked about is just reimagining, re-understanding, reinterpreting the biblical narratives that we've always grown up kind of knowing that we know. It's called Vindicating the Vixens, and it talks about different stories, different women's stories from the Bible, and how we've always thought about them, like David and Bathsheba, that's a story of abuse of power, not of an adulterous affair, that kind of thing. The other resource I want to tell you about is an academic journal and a magazine you can subscribe to. This is by CBE, which is Christians for Biblical Equity. And you can subscribe to them online or on Facebook. They put out some awesome resources, some great articles, blog posts, etc. But then I subscribe to both their publications. So this one is this is their magazine that's quarterly. It's called Mutuality is their magazine. So like this was an issue on the age of the silence breakers. So this issue was all about Me Too in the church. And then like this one was on gender and Bible translation. So they just do a great job of covering topics you may not have thought about or may be new to, and you can learn. And then there's an academic journal as well called the Priscilla Papers, and it goes through some deeper theology stuff, some deeper into the Bible, more academic based if you need it. But those are great resources. There's so many. So please feel free to contact me anytime. I would love to hear from you, and I wish you well on your journey and your education up to this point and in the future. So thank you so much. Great to be here with you all. I hope you have a great week.